Welcome to The Problem, a Lockwood & Co. podcast. I'm Caitlin.
I'm Alan.
And this week we are talking about the second half of part 1, which is called Two Heads, chapter 4 and 5. We thought about including chapter 6, but assumed that would make the episode much too long, so you'll all just have to wait until next week for that. So chapter 4, in which Lucy witnesses the destruction of a source at the Clerkenwell furnaces, and then she goes home to her apartment. Man, that sounds so boring, but actually, it's a pretty good chapter. The chapter art, is a skull being burned, not capital S skull, obviously.
Do you think he has like a bunch of styrofoam? Is this like a mannequin skull? Like what? Who is this? Someone's skull? Like what is happening?
I was thinking about this because, well, the art may not be as it is described in the chapter. Like, does she actually see a skull shape go in, or is it in a box?
It says specific. So he carries out something in a box, and then it says specifically, like, I don't know where the passage is, but I did note this because I was like, does she see him dump anything in there? And she does. It says that something black rolled into the furnace, black and round rolled into the furnace, and then he like turns around and gives her a thumbs up. So something was in the box.
My thought on that, or my theory that I'm going with, is that like they do a lot of work clearing graveyards, right? So presumably there's a lot of bodies around that are safe. So that's my thought. They just keep the bodies for these such instances, as bodies generally are sources, their own bodies, not in this case. Like, this is somebody else's skull, not the ghost's.
That's true. This is a body. Yeah, you're right. But it's not her body. Yeah.
Yeah, which is a little different than usual.
That's
but
funny.
Generally speaking, the most common source is a piece of their own body.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good answer. I like that, yeah.
That's what I'm going with. It makes sense to me. Yeah, when I was writing down my little what I think the chapter art is, I wrote the skull burning up, and then in brackets, or is it?
It's a bowling ball. That would be really weird.
I feel like it's got to be actual body parts, though, because there is that viewing area where everyone can watch, and they wouldn't risk it.
Yeah.
Right? They seem to have a good, smart operation going. We're talking way later in the book here, but whatever. They wouldn't risk it.
Yeah, we'll get to more because I'm not even sure that how big the operation really is. But yeah, she makes her way over to a real part of London, Clerkenwell, and it talks about how everything has been like kind of changed from the time that the problem started to accommodate this like furnace setup, in the way that the furnace pollution kind of is supposed to drift out to the Thames, but occasionally drifts into the neighborhood, which sounds great.
Yeah, I'm so curious about this ash. Like, if you collected up enough of it, could you
do something? Yeah.
Like create a little window or something, because you can do stuff with ash. Now that I think about it, maybe I'm just thinking about making soap.
Could you make haunted soap?
Ghost soap.
I feel like that would sell well in like America or something, like real London ghost soap.
Yeah. The source been made safe.
Yeah.
And Stroud is so particular about how he describes it here. It almost feels like maybe he had an idea to do something with it, but then just never got to it, or it didn't work out. You know,
the way that London was in like a Victorian time too, like when, capitalism was really going in its early days, and everything was like covered in soot, in certain parts of London and stuff like that. And
it does certainly call that to mind, yeah.
Yeah, it feels that way. This thing operates as like, it was exclusively Fitz at first, it talks about, but now is like a neutral territory for everybody, which is really interesting that they like confiscate your weapons and stuff when you come in, and it's a nonpartisan space.
I like to think that because agents are allowed to walk around with their rapiers basically anywhere in town. So the fact that they're not even allowed to have them like sheathed here is kind of odd, I think. So I like to think that Lockwood and Kipps got into a heated argument one time, and now everybody's got to turn in their rapiers on the way in.
So this is like punishing the class for the...
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
For the two schoolboys fighting.
There's no evidence to that, but it makes me happy.
That's funny. It's a nice little funnel for all the sources, though, because this is something that everybody uses to get rid of sources. So all the sources, for this area come here. It's not sinister. It's just really smart, I think.
Well, it is, but also, like, Fitz set this up. Like, Marissa Fitz, the original Fitz.
Mm-hmm.
And we know that, like, somewhere in the bowels of Fitz, they have a bunch of sources hanging about. That's where Skull came from.
Right.
So even before the operation that we find out about in this book, it seems likely that perhaps this has always been used as a sorting system more than a destruction system.
Yeah, exactly. So she goes in here and she meets a guy named Harold Mailer, who has a lot of personality for such a tiny role in the book, which I always appreciate from Stroud. It has a line here that is just like breaks my heart. It says, at 18, he knew the furnaces as well as anybody since he had worked there since the age of 8.
Again, this is my question about that I brought up last time about the child labor laws.
Yeah.
Like, what has happened?
Does he have psychic talent? Is it necessary to do this job? It doesn't seem like it.
It doesn't seem like it's necessary, but I can see where adults would think it is because it's like ghost related. So of course you got to have kids.
Was he talented? But the people going on jobs and stuff, they were like, "Oh my, Harold is an idiot, or he's such a handful." Like, send him to the shovel ash
To the
and
furnaces. I was thinking more. It's like Night Watch level. You couldn't get a job with the agencies because you weren't quite good enough, but this job is safer than being on Night Watch, so you try to get a job there.
It's probably a great job if you can't get any other job as an 8-year-old. But I don't know. It's terrible.
I always think in this world that a lot of these kids, especially the ones on Night Watch, gotta be orphans.
Yeah.
The ghosts got their parents. They got nowhere else to go. And the best fix that England seems to have decided about on is to repeal child labor laws.
Yeah, right.
8-year-olds got to pay rent,
Oh, man. Yeah, I wonder where he lived at that time. If there's like a dormitory situation here, which seems terrible. Like, it would be awful. Yeah.
I've said this so many times before, and I'm going to say it again. I would love a story in this world from an adult's perspective. Because the kids are all just like, yeah, this is normal. This is our society.
This is normal.
we don't need to talk to adults.
Yeah.
Like, I'm surprised more of them don't hate having adult supervisors, considering how much the kids run things.
So one of the things in this chapter that I wanted to talk about that I feel like it is happening here with Harold and was happening like in the first 3 chapters, but not enough to talk about it to this degree, I think, is that out of all the books, I feel like this one is the most hard-boiled detective book in the series.
Yeah, I can see that.
So like I've talked about before in the first and second books, like, oh, this is a detective book trope, or noir movies do this kind of thing. But this one, where you're like, she's literally like a private investigator. She's, not part of any agency. She's like renting out her knowledge and services. And then she's going to do this thing where like she's kind of friends with this functionary at this place, but not like, she doesn't have any close friends, which is such a hard-boiled detective thing. Like, she just knows a lot of people. And she doesn't totally trust this dude either, which is like really important to that kind of world.
I also feel like there's something about, like, at the end of the book, they have to get out of town and that leads them to the answers. That feels very... like they have to get out of town for kind of an unrelated reason to everything. And that leads them to the answer to what they were detecting, Like, I don't know, that feels very detective novel or what have you to me.
100%. I feel like a lot of this novel, if you compared it to like The Maltese Falcon, which is like the first Sam Spade book, it's a movie. I don't know. There's a lot of versions of that thing. It's very close in a lot of ways. I'm not saying like it's on purpose or anything, but I think that Stroud is aware of detective fiction and really enjoys dabbling in that stuff. And he adapts it really well to his like, spooky ghost world.
Yeah, it does sort of feel like he wanted to write a detective ghost story.
Yeah.
Yeah, for kids.
Yeah. Lucy's very hard-boiled.
Yes, her lone apartment that we see later.
Yeah.
That's very... I can't judge. That's mine. If it were mine, it'd be worse.
But yeah, she meets up with Harold and it's all kind of, he's like chewing the fat with her. He's very friendly. He's good at getting details from people and seeing like what was going on with the case and talking business. He knows about her private business. He's encouraging her to like, go with this person, go with Lockwood and Co.
I understand that Stroud is doing a thing here.
Yeah.
But like, why don't you partner with Anthony Lockwood again? I had him in here last week with that Holly girl. Like, come on.
To me, that feels like, that tells me that there's a quite a bit of, he seems chummy, but there's probably a lot of distance between them. That's how I read that he just doesn't understand the way he just stepped into it with her.
Yeah, there. Exactly. So he doesn't know really anything about her, but also I can just feel Stroud being like, this'll cause problems.
Yeah. Let's turn the screw here. Yeah. And it's hard to hear secondhand from people about your ex, right? Like that's always kind of painful. Like, oh, he came in here with that, with his girlfriend. She's so beautiful. With that new
girl he's got. Yeah.
Yeah. Love her. She's so sweet.
She seems a little mysterious. That Holly girl. Don't know much about her.
Yeah.
It's great.
That's what you want to hear.
And then he like prattles on for a bit and Lucy's just gone from listening. Then we hear that he asks them to rank the sources or like the ghosts that they fought to get the sources.
It's his own personal thing.
Okay, that makes more sense because I was going to be like, why did the furnaces need to know this? Just burn it. Like, what?
Oh,
but okay, you're right.
I think it's clearly for him.
Yeah.
It's for his business. That's why he's doing that.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's what I was going to say. Like, that's obvious, I feel. But if it is just, this is my weird little quirky thing that I've got, then yeah, that's fine. And everybody knows it that way. Yeah, whatever. Anyway, she rates it only 2 points below last book's Poltergeist.
Right.
So.
Yeah. It was pretty powerful.
Yeah.
It almost got her.
Yeah, the really creepy mirror thing. Yeah, that's pretty bad, actually.
She was only able to get it because of her matador skills. So that was the decisive factor.
It's always nice when like the weird special interests that a lot of children have really come in clutch.
In clutch. Good. That's right. He's like, we're going to have to fill out all this paperwork so you get paid. She's like, I have to watch the thing because they won't give me the money otherwise. He's like, okay, fine.
I get that Stroud wants her to have a little conversation with Skull and have Harold catch her. But like, how would anybody know if she stuck around and watched?
I thought that too. Yeah.
Like... No one's going to remember her. Lucy is literally described in the most nondescript way in all of the books, but like in especially this one.
Yeah. She has this thing here where it talks about, even so, it was still possible to feel the underlying psychic terror of the place, the frisson that came from the destruction of dozens of sources every hour, which is like super interesting to me. For one thing, it tells me that there are sources that are getting destroyed. So like, I think at first when I reread the book, I was like, they're just throwing mannequin parts in there. They're like, none of this is real, but some of it's got to be real if she's feeling this.
Yeah, I definitely think some of it's real.
Yeah.
Like even if we hadn't read that bit, I'd be like, they're not keeping everything. And B, they know that everybody around is psychic, and like Lucy is very special and she probably feels it more than anybody else. But there are other strongly talented people.
yeah, they would be able to tell if nothing was happening. And they say you can see the ghosts too when you throw them in the fire. So like, I think people would notice a lack of ghosts in the fire. So like, the ghosts are terrified about this. And we've seen ghosts when they go for their source, you know, become like more aggressive. What does this do for a ghost to destroy its source? Does it destroy it on the other side? Does it just destroy its connection with the living world?
That's what I've always thought, the second one.
That's how it feels to me too. Why would they be terrified about that though?
Well, they obviously want to be here for a reason, or the other way of saying destroying your connection with this world is dying, right?
Yeah.
So it's kind of the same. It's kind of like a second death. And people who are alive, they don't want to die.
Yeah.
You know, we know, well, okay, we don't know at this point, but I think we know later from Skull that the ghosts don't know what's over there. You know, like they don't.
Yeah, on the other side. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's still just a big blank to them what happens if they move on or whatever.
Right.
And also, most ghosts, Skull aside, are more like wild animals almost. So it might just be instinct.
Yeah, yeah. And I wonder if they feel anything too. You know how like George was putting him in the oven and stuff?
Skull did say he didn't like that.
Yeah.
But I don't think he said it hurt.
Yeah, so there's something going on here, and Lucy can sense it, which I just think is a fascinating idea. Later, Skull says that the place is hell on earth.
And it doesn't sound... like, it sounds very unpleasant for Lucy. Basically feeling people die over and over again.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I just feel like a lot of her psychicness causes her to feel bad things, is all I'm saying. Like, life must kind of suck for Lucy.
Oh, yeah. It's a never-ending, like, trauma window out there.
Yeah.
Yeah. While she's up there, she has this moment where it says, and halfway along, who was silhouetted at the window? Tall, thin. He turned, and I caught a flash of yellow jacket. So she's kind of like seeing Lockwood out of the corner of her eye again and again, but it's not ever him.
Yeah.
I like this because this is like the classic show don't tell kind of thing. It's not, I missed Lockwood and thought of him often, even though I didn't want to. It's showing us that this is happening and then her not really acknowledging her feelings about it, which is really, really good.
It also just feels more realistic than Lucy thinking, I miss Lockwood.
Totally.
Right. It's her.
Totally.
Because she doesn't really think his name, even in that situation. She just goes, oh no.
That's something I really like about this book. So in the previous book, we talked about how the perspective was like very backward facing in time, right from the beginning and all the way through. And this one, like I was talking about last time, there's a lot that's like she's saying a thing without saying the thing. Like it's very two-faced isn't the right way to say it. Like I think of it as like dialectical, but that's like a $10 word that feels pretentious to me. It's just very like she's has an unconscious that's very, very present in the story.
It feels like the narrator is present as opposed to looking back on it.
Totally. Oh yeah. In time, she's here with us. Yeah, that's true. Definitely.
Because if she was looking back on it, she would say something along those lines. Like she would say, oh yeah, and I saw Lockwood and every tall, lanky person that I walked by.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But I think she was present in the first two books too, but there wasn't this degree of irony. There wasn't this degree of like this unconscious weightedness to like an unsaidness to things in the same way that I think is about maturity, you know?
That is, yes, that is a good way of putting it. A lot in these first couple chapters just feels unsaid.
It's hard to do, but it's really, and it's only possible because we know the character so well, but it's a great evolution of her voice.
Yeah, she feels like not a completely different person, but you can really tell that this Lucy has been through even more shit. But then she and Skull have a nice little conversation.
Right.
I'm not entirely sure why I wrote this down, like what triggered the thought in my brain. But I do wonder what Skull thinks. Oh, because he was calling this hell on earth and how it's like cruel to the ghosts and blah, 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 blah. And so I wonder what Skull thinks about Lucy experimenting with convincing the ghosts to leave on their own the way she was last book.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like, does he like that? Does he think that's better? I don't know. I wish we had more of them chatting about it, but it doesn't really come up.
In the first part with the malevolent ghost, he was like, don't bother with her because she's like dangerous and mean. So it doesn't matter what she wants, which is more of like a safety thing than like a philosophical position, like what you're asking.
Skull doesn't want to lose his only conversation partner.
Right, yeah. He's like, that's just bad strategy. But yeah, he doesn't seem to have like an opinion on it. To some degree, he seems nihilistic about the entire thing. He's like, this whole thing is pointless. Like what you people are doing is dumb. And I wonder if he doesn't feel the same way about her discharging the energy of the sources in the same way as what you're saying. Like that might be pointless too.
I guess, but when he says this is pointless, I always thought that he was talking about how this isn't the root cause of the problem. You need to be addressing other things.
I think that's right. Yeah, that is true. But I'm thinking like if destroying the source doesn't destroy the ghost on the other side, it just cuts them off from the living world. It is also pointless to do in terms of the problem, because the problem would continue to get bad for the same reasons.
I can't imagine that destroying a source destroys like the essence of the person. Like that's a whole different question of ethics. Like that's a little deep for a kid's book is what I'm saying, I guess. If we are generally wiping the essence of a person out of existence, not just killing them, or you know what I mean? Like that feels like a whole different story.
I feel like that's what Deepak is telling regular people. Like, we destroy the sources at the furnaces and this gets rid of the ghost forever. Like, problem solved.
Well, I think that particular ghost can't come back.
They're not like, we destroyed your loved one's soul. They're not saying that.
But is a ghost a soul, or is it just a weird echo? Now, see, I've talked myself out of it.
Yeah.
I don't know. Because, like, Skull seems more like the soul of a person, right?
For sure.
But the ghosts, most of the ghosts we see don't feel that way.
Yeah. It does seem like there are souls that can exist after death, so there's some kind of existence after death. But, yeah, who knows about souls or anything like that? The books don't get into that.
And also, like, society would go fucking insane if religious people thought you were murdering their souls.
In the part where he burns the thing up, Skull says, another spirit disposed of then, how terribly nice and tidy. Makes you feel better, I suppose. So he calls it a spirit when they destroy the source. So.
But spirit doesn't necessarily, like, there's more than one definition for the word spirit.
Yeah.
When we're talking about ghosts. So he's not necessarily saying...
I think what he's saying is like...
Anyways.
Yeah, I think he's saying the Deepak line. He's saying, like, you people think you destroyed a spirit. Like, you're dumb. Because then he starts talking about, like, what you did is cruel and pointless and... like, you humans don't get it. It definitely doesn't destroy the spirit, whatever the spirit is. Like, there's still a ghost on the other side, in other words.
Yes. Yeah. And I do think that we are taking this way too seriously. Because honestly, I think Stroud had this conversation happen specifically so that he could re-bring up his previous foreshadowing.
Yeah.
And he's like, remember, I said this. This is a thing.
Which, yeah, will resolve this little thing that he says, this is the thing you've been talking about since the show.
Yes.
Death's in life and life's in death.
Yeah.
And so he brings it back up again. And she's like, yeah, I didn't respond because it makes no sense then and it makes even less sense now. So, like, And I think that's right. I don't think that anything that's happened so far gives us a lot of clarity on this fortune cookie that Skull is feeding to her.
It's so hard for me to say since I already know what it means.
Yeah, that's how riddles work, right?
It's true, yes. But also, it feels so obvious. I'm 100% sure I did not have a foreshadowing thought. Like, I didn't figure it out. But I also never try to figure things out. So
I'm in exactly the same boat. I'm the same way. I heard that thing and I was like, that's really interesting. I can't wait to hear what the answer is inside the narrative.
No, I've had people read the same books as me and go, oh, but this was so obvious. And be like, I just didn't think about it. Like, what do you mean? Who cares if it was so obvious?
Mm-hmm.
But why were you trying to figure it out in the first place? Just
Exactly.
enjoy a story.
Just ride the roller coaster. Don't look ahead and be like, oh, we're going to turn left. I got to brace myself. Like, that's not the point of the roller coaster. Like, just ride the roller coaster.
I mean, that being said, I do like to read the last couple lines of a book when I'm like 2 or 3 chapters in. But that's more of like a, am I feeling the right way about this type of thing? Not because I want the plot spoiled.
Yeah, I can't. I always just agree when you say that. I can't relate to it at all.
No, I know it's not for everybody. I'm not saying everybody should do it. Yeah. Some people, when I tell them, they're like
appalled.
They look at like I committed some heinous crime against humanity. I'm like, I get it, but I don't know. Sometimes I just have to.
The funny thing is, like, I'm the same way, but in the opposite way. I find this happens with you and I a lot, where like I will get near the last couple chapters sometimes in a book and never finish it because I'll be like, endings are bad. Actually, like I don't want to know what happened because
that drives me bananas.
It's so much more interesting without knowing. I don't know. So.
Oh, see, and I've read books or seen shows or whatever that don't really end like on purpose, not things that were canceled or whatever. And I hate it. I think it's lazy writing.
Oh yeah, like an ambiguous ending.
It's like when a song fades out instead of having an ending. That just feels lazy to me. Like, oh, you couldn't come up with something, so you just faded it out.
Yeah, it depends. I think unfinished works are the best. That's always my favorite thing.
Well, I've heard other people who enjoy fade outs on songs say that just means the song is always playing somewhere and they like it for that reason. Mm-hmm. And I think that's kind of like, I think that works in the metaphor.
I would love for a live band to do that where they just get quieter and quieter and fade out.
God, I would hate that so much.
That would be so dumb. But
all right.
Back to the story. Harold, after rolling in a mannequin's skull or something, or some poor person's skull from a graveyard that had no psychic charge, comes back around with the paperwork while Lucy is chatting it up with Skull and witnesses the tail end of the conversation and sees Skull in the bag. He says, "Interesting gear you carry around with you, looks bulky." And Lucy has like a pretty clever response, and she's like, "It is some kind of new lamp I was trying out, new Rotwell one. Wasn't very good, too bulky, as you say."
And it's a really good lie, because in the next chapter we're reminded that Rotwell is always turning out new experimental machines to help with ghost hunting that don't work very well. So that's like a real thing.
Yeah. This feels very like 1990s, 2000, like Microsoft versus Apple to me, where like Fitz is like Microsoft and Rotwell is like Apple. Or like, what about this iPad thing? What about a laptop thing? What about like a bunch of gadgets that, and Microsoft is like, yeah, we just own your soul. You know, that's more profitable, actually.
Yeah. It's just like, oh, all workplaces use us.
Right. Yeah. That's the key to success.
And if they don't use Windows, then they use Microsoft Office. Yeah. You know, like, and then he has this whole thing where like, if you're ready, I'll escort you to the gate. Mm-hmm. That sounds so sinister to me. Like, why? Lucy's perfectly capable of walking. You can leave me alone now.
Isn't this place so weird? Like, I wonder if everybody does have to have some kind of attendant because they don't want agents poking around in here and like seeing what's up.
The like rows and rows of backup skeletons they have.
Right. Yeah.
I don't know. It seems like such an odd... Oh, I did write down, and I forgot to bring it up. This is the one big thing in this book that makes me... Like, I would have killed to see this set.
Oh,
this
the furnace?
would have been... Yeah.
Yeah,
I
this
don't know
would be
why.
cool.
It's so... Like, the outside... I feel like the outside, this is going to sound silly, gives really, like, Willy Wonka's Chocolate Factory vibes.
Oh, that's... Yeah.
Right? Because it's so, like, mysterious and...
And the gate, yeah.
And the gate and the furnace, like the smokestacks and stuff. And then you go in and instead of a candy paradise, you just have like double death, extra death.
Death for the dead. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't even know how to explain that. It's like literally the worst possible thing.
Yeah. It makes Harold Mailer either an Oompa Loompa or Willy Wonka. It's pretty funny
Well,
to
he
think
started when he was 8, so...
He's an Oompa Loompa.
Well, sounds a little like slavery to me, but what do I know?
It says that... I only realized this time. I don't know why I didn't understand this any other time. But right after this, it says, like, there's a page break and it says, it was 8:30 when I finally got back to the little apartment. And I'm always like, yeah, 8:30 at night. But no, it's like 8:30 in the morning.
In the morning, yeah.
Of course.
Because they've been talking about sunrise this whole time.
Yeah. Poor Lucy.
I have to say, now that we've just brought up sunrise in an organic manner, like tomorrow or the day after is finally going to be the day where sunrise here is after 6 a.m. And I'm like really excited.
Yeah. Yeah. It makes
it's my favorite day of summer.
It's terrible.
Those 5 a.m. sunrise, man. Don't live in the north, folks.
Sometimes it's,
sucks.
4 something in the morning here. It's like, oh, come on.
Anyways, back to the book. We head on over to Lucy's apartment. And we get a little bit of it and how she just lives in one room with a little like kitchenette area. And it sounds like it's a mess, but not dirty. You know?
Yeah.
Like I don't get the feeling that there's bugs and stuff. It's just old and Lucy doesn't keep things tidy.
Mm-hmm. If she was here for like a year, there might be bugs the way that she's headed.
I don't know that she would let it get that bad though.
Maybe.
I have a little bit more faith in her than that.
I feel like some of this, the way that her apartment is not just like sloppy teenagerness, but is also like depression.
Oh, yeah, I was just going to say that. Yeah, it sounds like depression apartment. Yeah, 100%. Like she's got somebody else doing her laundry, which I don't say that in a way to have shade. If your mental health doesn't let you do things and you can afford to pay somebody to do it, absolutely.
Oh.
Even if your mental health does let you do things, yes, pay somebody else to do them. If you can afford it.
I read that as there's no washer and dryer situation here.
Right, but Lucy could go to a laundromat.
Oh, laundromat. That's true.
Right?
Yeah.
So, but she just pays somebody else to do it all for her. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, yeah, that seems fair.
We do find out here that she's been here for 4 months.
Yes, that's important timeline stuff. That might be the most timeline information we've ever gotten in 4 books.
Yeah, most like down to the day kind of stuff. And like we said last time, this is during the same winter, the quote unquote black winter. So this has got to be like the tail end of it because that was in November. Yeah. So 4 months, December, January, February, March-ish, April, like we said. So
beginning of spring, but if it's a bad year, winter's sort of hanging on.
If there's a ton of ghost activity, does that literally make the atmosphere colder?
Yeah, probably does.
Yeah.
This is going to sound so stupid since we were just talking about this, though. It just dinged in my brain. Do they have daylight savings there? What would be the best time to keep them on?
Oh,
for ghosts?
It'd be around ghosts and not around agriculture or something.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. So we're back at the apartment.
She doesn't want to cook food. She doesn't have the energy for it. She gets some takeout.
That also sounds very depression.
Yeah. And Skull basically says that. He's like, so here we are again, just you and me, 2 jolly roommates.
Yeah, like I feel if Skull weren't there, this exact conversation would still happen, just it would be Lucy in her head.
Mm-hmm.
In this scene, Skull isn't even Skull. He's just Lucy's thoughts.
It's so, I don't know. It's funny, but it's sad. Like, I worry about her, but it's really good.
It's so sad.
Yeah.
And so alone, and then she just turns him off, basically.
Yeah.
And even that is sad, kind of.
When she does that, it says like all the energy goes out of her. She just wants to go to sleep, which is another like depression thing.
It kind of sounds like somebody, like you took your prescription to shut the voices up,
mm-hmm.
you know, and it just kind of drained you. And you're like, well, just going to go to sleep. Not that I'm saying your prescriptions are bad. You should take them.
Yeah, but once the pressure's off, then that's when all the weariness floods in.
Well, I did write down that I wish I could shut off my inner voice the way that she can.
She goes to like throw away her stuff and the garbage is so full that she has to like put the garbage on the floor next to the garbage can.
Yeah, but this is almost what gives me hope for Lucy, and why I think it wouldn't turn into a bug situation, because she doesn't just leave it beside her bed or or open on the counter or something. She does try to get rid of it correctly. So it's, I don't know. It feels I think saying that it would be bug infested if it was like a year later isn't giving her enough credit.
Yeah, maybe not. It is very grungy, and again, it feels very like hard-boiled detective. Like their living spaces, which are usually also their office, is always like really grungy, full of like cigarette butts and ashtrays, multiple ashtrays, and then there's like cigarettes and the coffee cups and stuff, and old coffee and half-eaten donuts and stuff like that. So like, I feel like this is all part of the private investigator mood that's going on.
Right. In a lot of detective type noir movies, they always seem so cool when they're out on the streets, but then they go home and it's like, oh, they're just a loser.
Yes, exactly that. Like their whole personal life is empty because of the way that their existence is and stuff like that. So that's one of the things that I really like about his use of the hard-boiled thing here is how it underlines that, but how that's not Lucy's, like, that's the opposite of Lucy's emotional reality, because she's an empathetic, connected person.
Yeah, who's cut herself off by choice because she thinks that she's, well, for a lot of reasons.
For all the wrong reasons.
Yeah.
So it's like, I think it's a great use of that for exactly that reason, because it's such a stereotypically, like if you look up like red-pilled manhood stuff, you know, on the internet, please don't do that. But if you do, the like detective, hard-boiled detective stuff is like frontline stuff there, because it is this like emotionally cut off, very cool guy who's very like powerful in a certain kind of way and lives by a code and blah, 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 blah. But it's very like empty and lonely inside. And those kind of guys can relate to that. So I really appreciate the use of it here because it underlines her loneliness, but it's not the destiny of this book. Like, I would say only half of this book is really hard boiled. And then like the other half of it is more like a heist or something.
Yeah. And I like the difference, because detectives are either they were a workaholic, so their family left them, or their family was murdered, and
killed,
that's why they're now a workaholic. Like, it's one of those two things. Yeah. And that's just not, we know that that's not what happened with Lucy. We know that this isn't what she wants.
Yeah. Yes. Not what she wants. That's so good. Yeah.
Yeah. Makes it more sad, I think.
It does. It is really sad. Yeah, she's so lonely.
Though also a little bit like, you don't have to be quite so self-sacrificing. Nope. You know, like you can just.
But that's
the lesson. All about you.
You gotta start here, because this is the lesson of this book, right?
Yes, exactly. So she goes to sleep, or I love how she says, I lay back on the bed and closed my eyes, and then I was still in the same position 5 hours later. So honestly, we don't know if she slept or not, or if she just laid there listening to her own voice.
Oh my God. I can't live with that headcanon. She slept. I just let the poor girl sleep. Oh my God. That didn't even occur to me.
Honestly, the way that she's described when she goes to the door does sound like she was asleep and then is like, whoa, 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 what is the world?
Yeah.
Somebody knocks on the door and she's like, clients don't come here. We talk on the phone. Who could this possibly be? Oh, and then she talks about her neighbors a little bit. And she says how, or maybe this was earlier and I meant to bring it up. The guy across from her is just like, all he does is grow lavender.
Yeah.
Or he's just full of lavender. And I have this friend who's allergic to lavender. And it made me like feel bad. Like what
would they do in the... Yeah.
And like this whole world, there's got to be people who are allergic to lavender, and lavender's fucking everywhere.
She definitely thinks about her neighbors because she's like, who could be knocking on my door? And she's going through like a list of all of her neighbors, which further emphasizes that this place is not great.
The housing for lost souls, but not literally. Right. Well, Skull's there now, so maybe literally.
Literally, yeah. There's a thing here about her landlady that is funny. In the North American version, they took out her nationality and that she drinks vodka and stuff. Maybe they thought that it was racist. I don't know. Where she talks about her landlady is a Czech person, like from Czechoslovakia. She resided like a spider in the basement flat, sensitive to every creak of door and stair, particularly if you hadn't paid your rent. So I don't know. I just thought it was funny that they took that out. It's weird.
Interesting. I don't even remember that bit. I just have the American bit. Although I will say the bit where Lucy was eating her takeout and they kept calling them fries.
Yeah.
In my head, I was like, that cannot have been what Stroud wrote.
No. Yeah, that one's more obvious. Normal. Yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway, she goes up there to the door in her pajamas, like, who could this possibly be? Scratching her butt, yawning, and opens the door, and it's Anthony Lockwood. End of chapter.
You just said
Anthony
the English way. It's not just me.
In chapter 5, Lockwood calls on Lucy to hire her for a job.
And the chapter art is 2 very inviting looking cups of tea. I would drink both of those in very quick succession. I've had 2 very large cups of tea while we've been recording. They're very good.
I'm halfway through a cup of tea. I like that the cups don't match. The mugs don't match.
Yes. I don't think I've been in an English household that had matching cups.
Oh, yeah?
Nice ones. I don't think so.
I feel like that's more common for mugs to not match. I do have like a matching mug set they match the plates and like the whole thing.
Oh, I hate that.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not about that. I'm not about the mugs matching the plates.
I'm not either. I inherited the whole thing. I didn't want it, but...
Oh, I will say we have like a nice china set that has teacups that match.
Yeah.
That we stole from my grandmother while she was in the hospital.
Stole seems strong, but I don't know the backstory, so maybe it's true.
I mean, she was moving. We were packing up all of her stuff and sort of dividing it up between the family. And she was okay with this because she's in an assisted living place now.
Doesn't seem like stealing.
But she was literally in the hospital for an unrelated matter while we were packing up a bunch of her stuff and divvying it up. So she had like no say in what was taken and who took what. Again, it doesn't matter. She doesn't miss it. We have her over for dinner a lot and she loves seeing her china when she comes over for dinner. So I just like saying it that way because it makes us sound like assholes. My aunt took her silverware. It was...
My uncle held her down while we did it.
Well, he took her to the hospital.
She was tied up. Yeah.
Almost literally because she had sepsis. So.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, it was a whole big thing.
The picture is so not fuzzy that you can tell that they are different kinds of mugs.
The last one, too. I feel like if we'd had a picture of a skull being burned in a furnace in book 2 or 3, it would have been like hazy, black, round. Like there would have been the flames obscuring everything. This book's so different art-wise.
You can almost see a reflection in the spoon that's sitting there. Yeah. Have you ever... this might be way too personal of a question. Have you ever been ambushed by an ex?
No. The short answer, no.
I feel like I have done this to someone, but it's... I'm trying to think if it's ever... It's not exactly been done to me, I've more done it to someone than someone's done it to me. It's hard. It's a shock. It's definitely like your mind blanks out.
I really love how this is described because it's almost like, because at first one of the first things she does is describe what smile we get from him, which is so very Lucy.
Yeah.
And then she sort of immediately categorizes what's the same about him and what's new about him.
Mm-hmm.
And that feels like exactly what you would do. Like, oh, okay. And then like, oh, that's new. What happened there? What's going on? And then at the end of all that, she's still just like, Lockwood is here. Like, even after taking him in, she still doesn't quite believe it.
Yeah. And it's clear from all of that she is still smitten. It's not
I
like
don't know
this.
if smitten's quite the word, but she definitely still remembers every single thing about him. Yeah.
She's still attracted to him, I guess, is the thing. Like, this distance hasn't like changed anything about that, it seems to me.
Yeah, I don't even know. Like, you're right that she's still attracted to him, but I don't even know. That's not what this gives to me. Just the words that you're using don't feel right.
Mm-hmm.
But you are right. Like, she is definitely still attracted to him.
Well,
she was immediately like, oh, it's my smile.
Yeah.
She immediately was like, oh, he's wearing the tie I gave him. Thank God.
I think it's those things. But there is like, it is what I was saying earlier too, though. Like, I don't think you're wrong to say that, nah, it's not smitten, Alan. That's not right. Because it is like, there's a lot of unsaidness here, right? There's a lot of like, he's not the same. And he is guarded from me in some way. Like, there's something different about him. But
then there are still things like we get all that categorizing of him from Lucy's point of view about what she remembers, or like what's the same and what's different, like I said. But also it seems very clear that Lockwood agonized over what to wear, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Like very specifically chose to wear the tie that Lucy gave him.
Yeah, I think that's right.
And she says that he's wearing a new suit, you know, that just like all the others is a little too tight. And
and the old
but
coat.
It is, and the old coat, yeah. But he did choose to wear the new suit.
Mm-hmm.
And also she says that people always call her, which presumes that that's what she gives out to everybody, her phone number. But he decided not to call her, and that must have been a choice too, because he could have called her.
Oh yeah, you're
right.
You're right.
But he was like, no, I want to show up. I want to talk to her in person. And so it just seems very clear to me that maybe like Lucy is shocked and doesn't know what to do, but it also is clear that Lockwood, like I said, agonized over every single decision.
Yeah. There's a lot of character work happening on Lockwood's side of things too. I think you can read a lot of things about him that are not what Lucy is thinking about him. That's really good.
Absolutely. And then they very awkwardly, like, he comes in, and then there's the funny thing with the laundry, and it's just awkward.
It's very awkward. All of this is, it's very, I don't know, almost rom-com-y, the way that she's on the back foot. Yeah.
And that he has to, like, hand her underwear, basically. Like, that's a very rom-com. And then she has to, like, hide a bunch of, like, a bunch of underwear again. Like, that is extremely rom-com.
It's also, like, in terms of genre, again, we're, like, back in the noir hard-boiled detective space. Because a lot of times they'll sleep in their office, or, like, that is where they live. And what always happens at the beginning of those novels is, like, the old flame or the sexy woman stranger shows up with the job that's going to be the job for the book.
Or they've been working on the job, and then eventually she needs a safe place to stay. So she comes over later and then has to see how he lives. And it's like, oh.
Yep. Yeah. Gets a glimpse into his life.
Hired. Yeah.
And it feels very much like that. Like the hard-boiled detective's old flame has shown up, and there's all of the mixed feelings that are around that whole thing.
But it's good, and eventually, I like how Lockwood says, this is nice. He doesn't try to shame her. for the choices that she's made. They get a little bit heated later on, but he's not like pointing out how much nicer things are at Portland Row.
Yeah, she's like, it's no Portland Row. And he's like, well.
But yeah, he doesn't dwell, which I think is good. And I think is a really clear indicator for how things are going to go between them in this book. Because I feel like Stroud could have made the choice for Lockwood to be angry at Lucy for leaving. Mm-hmm. And I think it was right not to. Yeah, throughout the whole book, it seems very much more like he blames himself.
Yeah, he's humbled.
Considering book 3 is correct.
Yeah.
And I love that because then he gives the anger to George. And I just think that is the absolute correct choice there.
Oh, that's really good. Yeah. Yeah. I agree with you. I think that I said this before in the previous book. She needed to leave, but she left for the wrong reason. Like she doesn't understand why she left. And Lockwood's reading of the whole thing, I think is correct because he's confused by her reason. He's like, that doesn't make any sense. But then his reaction to it, I think, is kind of wrong, quote unquote wrong. I like that he's humbled and I like that he's not angry, like you said. We'll talk about the way that all of this heals later. It's really good to start in this place, I think.
Yes. But then I also like that Lucy doesn't get off scot-free because George is mad at her.
Yeah.
You know, like I think he just did it so perfectly, Stroud, I mean.
It's really good. This book is so much more emotionally complex. There's always like it's like I said, dialectical. There's always like two things happening at the same time with their emotions. It's beyond like bittersweet or something like that. It's really good. It's much more grown up. Yeah.
And then Lucy sort of breaks a lot of the awkwardness by offering tea.
Yeah.
You know, the English tradition. And then they have a normal-ish conversation, sort of catching each other up on things and everything.
That passage is like marked out by hundreds of people where it says making tea is a ritual that stops the world from falling in on you.
Oh, right. Yes.
There's a lot of like funny stuff of like, why didn't I buy a vacuum cleaner?
Oh, yeah.
I like that joke. She has a hard time making the tea. It like takes her longer to do it than she would otherwise. I just find all of this to be really true. I've never been able to like, it doesn't apply here, but Stroud makes it feel like it applies that they were a couple and now they're not a couple. That's the energy that's happening here.
Right. Yeah.
But it's not true. So like I keep comparing my life experience to that. But I've always had a very hard time with like being around a person that I was romantically involved with, and like now we're friends, and like this energy, this kind of manic energy that Lucy has, feels very relatable to me. Like I can't do anything because like there's this thing that's happening that we're not talking about, and it makes everything weird.
Yeah, I do think, to your point about them not ever having been a couple, part of their problem is that they never were.
Mm-hmm.
If that makes sense. Like their whole thing in the first 3 books is how physically and emotionally close they were without communicating.
Yeah. Also, the way that she's acting and the way that he's acting kind of tells us that they haven't seen each other in all this time.
Yeah, no, they absolutely have not. As far as the potential season 2 of the TV show goes, like I've always thought that they would combine books 2 and 3, but also the ending of book 3 would be such a good place to end a season to make it feel there was more time.
Oh, I see what you mean.
Right? Because if you end book 3 and then, you know, the next episode like ends with Lockwood knocking on her door or whatever, so they only spend 1 episode apart, it doesn't feel as weighty, even if like with a season break, it really still would be the next episode. But because there's real world time in between, it would feel longer. So I don't know. It's just interesting.
Yeah, I wonder how you would handle that.
Anyway, so she asked about George, and we hear about, like I mentioned before, all the Rotwell trinkets that George has been experimenting with. And then she asks about Holly. And even Lockwood is like, eh? And then Lucy's like, Holly? I just get the feeling that Lockwood had decided before he got there to not bring up Holly, no matter what.
Yeah.
But then Lucy brought her up, and he's just like, what do I do? What do I do? And we just hear that she's good. We don't hear anything about her. And then it almost gets tense at the end, at the end of a page where Lockwood says, I'm not sure this is really the place for you, Lucy. And Lucy says, surely that's my business. And he's just like, yes, of course it is. I'm not here to talk you out of that. I tried and failed at that months ago. You made your decision, and I respect it. And this is kind of where we flash back a little bit, is it?
It says, it was one of those moments when a single strand of time looped off from the rest, carrying me on it, and everything else seemed to freeze. I sat there thinking back across that long, hard winter to the awful day I'd left the company. And,
right, yeah.
And then we talk about some backstory stuff. I thought that moment was really interesting in terms of like, that does feel, that kind of crystallizes a certain experience you have when you're talking to someone where they'll say something and then it just triggers your mind to like looking backwards. But also like, given all the metaphors of this series and the relationship of ghosts and time and stuff like that, and the way that Lucy does lose time, you know, I thought it was significant.
Oh, yeah.
It's interesting because it's kind of how I think trauma works, where something traumatic happens to you and then like that event, this event in the present that's happening right now reaches backward into the past and changes experiences that might have been, this is especially true, like in romantic relationships. It can change happy memories into like sad memories, and can change future experiences like into, you know, what could be a good experience into a more like, it just triggers your trauma. And that's kind of how ghosts work, you know, like that's why they're dislocated in time, because they're like, this traumatic experience just keeps happening in this place over and over and over again. So I don't know, this moment just got me kind of thinking about how time works and how she's like, what it really is like sets the stage for him to give us a little bit of backstory and some in-moment flashback. But I was also like, that just kind of links up with how ghosts work and how ghosts are a metaphor for trauma.
So we get a little like brief overview of how Lucy left the agency, which basically Lockwood and Lucy had an argument at a cafe. And then
he made toast for her. He put it in front of her. And then Holly was cleaning up the crumbs in front of her. And,
oh, God. And then Lucy just left in the middle of the night. Basically, didn't say goodbye to anybody.
She's done that before.
Yeah.
That's familiar for her.
But also before that, Lockwood ended his sort of a bit of talking with, I'd like to hire your freelance services for a case.
Oh, yeah. Really. Very important. Like the point of the whole thing. Yes.
Yep. So they talk about that and how Penelope Fitz has been sort of sending them jobs, which Lucy is like, she has a whole agency. Why is she doing that? And Lockwood is like, because she likes us.
Yeah. Bad answer.
Yeah. And so she's given them this job and they want to impress her, obviously, but the job requires a good listener. And obviously Lucy is the best listener. So
that must be why he's here.
Lockwood thought to himself, this is my chance.
She's such a valuable asset that how could he pass it up? I like that she talks about how she's thought about this moment and she's had fantasies about Lockwood, like, please, Lucy, come back to us, and things like that. But it never occurred to her that he would show up and be like, I'd like to hire you for a job. That just was outside the bounds of her fantasies.
Yep. And it's, I think I've talked about this before in the show when we see at the beginning her and Nori fantasizing about being like the most famous agents ever, basically. I don't think she ever wanted him to beg her back because she thinks that it's unsafe for her to be there.
Yeah.
But she still fantasized about it.
Mm-hmm.
Right, even though it's not something she wanted.
Well, I think it's that dialectical thing. She wants it. She does want that, but she
Right,
doesn't
okay.
want it.
I guess she doesn't want it to come to fruition.
Yeah. And this is a more irresistible proposal than just come back to me, come back to me. It's like, oh, there's actually there's reasons behind this, and this actually makes sense, and this would be good for my career. And he waited for the right moment, it feels like.
Yes. And I wrote down a note in the middle of this conversation. Oh, it's when Lockwood has like a whole paragraph talking about, you know, how good her talent is and how much he believes in her and all that sort of thing. And I was like, this is the opposite of what Skull was just doing to her. Where Skull was just saying, well, your life kind of sucks and you're sad and blah, 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 blah. And then Lockwood shows up and is like, I believe you've always had your talent under excellent control. I don't think there's the slightest chance of you endangering us. You always were too strong for that. Like, that's really nice to say about someone.
It's also kind of at odds with Lockwood in the previous book. It doesn't feel like a lie. It feels like evolution on his part. That he's not letting his fears get in the way of saying the truth.
That's why Lockwood is different in this book. Because guess what? He got what he wanted. She left him.
Yeah.
And now he's like, oh no, that's not what I wanted at all. I fucked up.
Yeah, I think that's why it gives off so much energy of like an ex showing up.
I sort of think of this of like I've heard women talk about when an ex of theirs starts dating like a friend of theirs, and the friend talks about, yeah, he's just great. And she's like, he's only good now because I trained him.
Oh,
you know? And so this is kind of like
secondhand benefits. Yeah.
Yeah. Or because I left him over all those bad things and he got his shit together.
Yeah.
You know, so this is kind of like Lucy gets to reap the benefits of her own work.
That's funny. That should be how it goes. It's rarely how it goes, though. That's true. That's true. But the thing that really is, I feel like, is the hook in his whole pitch is our client is Penelope Fitz. And she was like, hold up. That took me by surprise. Which is like an opportunity for Stroud to introduce to the reader who just picked this book up, who is Penelope Fitz. Like you said, doesn't she have an agency of her own and all that stuff? So I think that's part of the reason why she's in, because this is like the most prestigious agency, and like it's just a intriguing puzzle of like, why are you being offered this specifically?
Or that's an acceptable jeez, that's not a word, an acceptable excuse to tell herself for why she says yes.
Yeah, I think that's totally
because
true.
It's Penelope Fitz. So yeah, I can work with Lockwood one more time.
Because she wants to.
Yeah. So yeah, Lucy says yes, basically.
There's a moment here where Lockwood, it says, he flicked a glance up at me. It was sad and hopeful all at once, a glance that presumed nothing, then gently lowered his gaze and went back to contemplating his hands. That for me was like all of that emotional complexity that I talked about with Lucy, where she's feeling multiple feelings at the same time, is there with him too. Like you can really feel it in that moment.
Yeah. I do like that when Lucy's thinking about it, she says, this bit is great. She says, I saw Lockwood, George, and Portland Row, the house and life I'd left behind. She does not mention Holly.
I know. She leaves Holly out.
But then she remembers, working with Mr. Farnaby and how terrible that was, and how much she just wants to be on a good job without an adult making things terrible.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually really enjoy that she says yes for more than one reason. She wants to work with Lockwood and George again, but also she wants the freedom again to do her job properly.
Mm-hmm.
The way that she's good at it.
I think that speaks to the whole ex-lovers thing, because if you do go back out into the world and you both date a few other people and then you meet back up, you'd be like, I didn't know how good we had it,
Yep.
that kind of energy. That's how that feels. He says to her, there's no one else I would want at my side. And I'm like,
oh yeah, that's really
Lockwood.
good.
Like hard eyes.
It also feels like this is a really good opportunity for somebody to be brought to Penelope Fitz's attention personally. Why wouldn't he give that to Lucy? The best.
Yeah.
Lucy says, for 1 or 2 nights only, I'm in. And then that's when Lockwood gives her his old radiant grin.
Right. For the first time, the old grin extended its way fully across his face. Its radiance bathed me. That was something else that hadn't changed at all. So I don't know. I read that she still has all that affection for him there. I guess that's what I was talking about earlier.
She wasn't mad at him by the end, right? That's not why she left.
No.
Or at least that's not why she thinks she left.
She should have been mad at him, but she wasn't. So what do you have a best joke?
I just closed my book because I forgot about this. I don't remember much being funny, so probably something really mean that Skull said to Lucy.
Okay, so mine is exactly that, where he's like, "Ooh, careful when you cross the room, you don't collide with any of your pals. I can barely see the far wall. There are so many close chums lining up to chat with you."
You know what? Actually, I'm going to say there's like a whole half of a page where Lucy and Lockwood end up talking about underwear, and I die a little bit, you know?
Oh,
because if I were Lucy in that, I would be actually physically dying.
Yeah.
And I'm going to go with that because it's like funny and silly, but also I can feel her embarrassment and her like, please don't think of me. You're like, this isn't how I would have planned this. It's really good.
There's like a moment where she takes a wet towel off the chair, and then it doesn't say this in the text, but in my mind, she like gives a little scream when there's a bunch of underwear tangled on the back of the chair.
Yep.
It's that kind of energy.
But just like him handing her the laundry and saying it looks like underwear, and her being like, it's my neighbor's. And being like, it's your neighbor. Why? And then her sort of kind of having to leave it or take it, like her being like, I don't know what to do. It's really good.
I would just collapse into ash like
I would shut the door in his face. And be like, give me 5 minutes.
It's over.
If you want to come in, I need 5 fucking minutes, buddy. Get my life together.
We can never talk again.
Most punk rock? Nothing really.
I mean, showing up at your ex's door when you know it's not okay.
I don't know. That feels kind of ambushy, not punk rocky.
Yeah. Yeah.
Part of me
is it romantic or is it stalker? I don't know.
Well, it's not stalker. It's like we said, like it could have been a phone call, but Lockwood knew that he probably wouldn't get the answer he wanted if it was a phone call, and that he had to show up, and he didn't give her a choice. But it's not like malicious.
Yeah.
A part of me thinks that maybe from his point of view, Harold Mailer is being very punk rock, you know, like yeah. I'm acting against the Fitz people. I'm making my own money. They put me in here when I was 8. Screw them. But actually, he's just working for Rotwell and like
more part of the system
evil
than ever.
Criminals. So yeah. But I feel like from his point of view, he's being very punk rock.
That might be true. Yeah, there's not really much.
These chapters are mostly about loneliness.
Yeah.
So it kind of
the most punk rock
sad.
Thing. Loneliness. Yeah. I don't even know that I'm on the bandwagon. Yeah. Like I get your argument. I don't think I can come up with the most creative argument. Yeah, there's
I don't actually believe this. I do think he's just a bit of a shit.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. If you want to point out the very obvious punk rock that we missed, punk rock moment, you can follow the show on Twitter at Lockwood Podcast and talk to us there. If you, for some reason, are interested in books that I'm reading, I sometimes post about them on Instagram at Inferior Kate Reads.
Send your emails to contact@hologrammedia.com or go to hologrammedia.com/contact and fill out the form.
And remember to always wear a new suit when ambushing your ex.